I want to try to prove very simply how I know that evolution is false. There's many reasons, but basically this is how I know. So evolution is based on a gain of information. For instance, like if raptors evolved into birds, then raptors would have to have gained the information in their DNA to grow wings, right? That would have to happen. So as they breed or whatever over millions of years, they somehow gain the information for wings and beaks and etc., so that over millions or billions of years they can evolve into birds, because that's what they believe, raptors to birds, whatever monkeys to man, whatever their belief is now. I don't know. I don't follow everything evolution teaches anymore. But at any rate, I'm just going to prove really easily how we don't gain information as we breed the next generation, etc. We actually lose genetic information. Okay, and that information can then be regained, but other information will be lost. All right, so I want to prove that here. So say you have a situation to where a person has a dominant and a recessive gene, and they, sleep with a person that also has a dominant and a recessive gene. Well, the dominant is the most powerful gene. So if you have the dominant represented, then you're going to be born with that dominant trait, whatever the trait is. Whether it's the dominant is tall and the recessive is short, whether, the dominant is right hand dominant and the recessive is left hand dominant, whatever the trait is. So for every trait, this is how you pass on traits. So the first 1 in 4, the first possibility to pass on is dominant, okay? The second possibility to pass on is dominant recessive, okay? Or recessive dominant. But either way, the trait that the person is going to get here is going to be dominant. The fourth possibility is recessive. So say this is left hand. So this would be right. This would be right. This would be left. This would be left. But this person is going to be right-handed. This person's going to be right-handed. This person's going to be right-handed. This person's going to be left-handed. Okay, so you have a 50% chance that the child is going to be born dominant. So their genes are going to just be right hand. So they're going to lose the information to be able to pass on the left-handed gene, or that you have a recessive. So the person is going to be born left-handed, but lose the information to pass on a right-handed gene. Now that doesn't mean they could, sleep with a person that is dominant, or they could sleep with a person that is dominant recessive, and they will regain the possibility of passing on the right-handed gene. But this is how, the information is carried. So you have a 25% chance to lose the recessive trait and a 25% chance to lose the dominant trait. You see what I'm saying? And that's for every single trait, whatever it is, everything that you pass on. Some of them are more complex, like, you have brown, blue, green, as far as eye color, you have loads of different hair colors. And so they're way more complex. But some of them are just like you're either right-handed or left-handed, whatever the situation is. So you have this small chance of a 50% chance in this scenario of being able to pass on both bits of information, where the person can pass on the dominant or recessive information, or you also have a 50% chance that they lose one or the other of these bits of information. And that's for every single trait. So there's also the chance that you could, have a recessive person, and then these people only can pass on the recessive information. They don't even have the possibility for dominant information. That's why they don't want people to inbreed, because if your family, this is common of having only the recessive gene, then you inbreed with another person of your own family, then they're only going to have the recessive gene. And whatever that trait is, whether, say, it's, some kind of bad trait like Parkinson's, or whether it's something like dwarfism, or, whatever, as far as you get down, and smaller, whatever the situation is. But we could, in theory, and Hitler did studies like this, where he found people that carried the gene trait for twins. Okay, and so these people had the trait to be able to pass on and have twins, and he bred people that had twins with other people that had twins in their family. So say this person was a twin, this person was a twin, and then they both carried the twin gene. And what you're looking for is the person to have, the recessive, where they're going to have twins. And then you want to find another person that is recessive. And if you keep doing this, then over time, this is how dog breeding or anything else works, you're going to eliminate the possibility of dominant genes, and you're going to increase the chances of twins. Okay, so I don't know if they can certainly know that this person is recessive or dominant recessive. I don't know how far they can get into looking at the chromosomes in the person to see if that's what happens. But either way, the more you breed this in, the more you start to lose the information to be able to pass on the dominant gene. This is how dog breeds work. So say you take two small dogs, you breed a small dog with a small dog, okay? And then say you have 10 different groups of small dogs, the smallest dogs you can find, and you breed them all together. And then of the 10 different family groups, they all have, say, 6 or 8 small puppies, okay? And then you take of that group of, those puppies, you take the smallest puppies from each of the 10 groups, and then you breed them with the smallest puppies from one of the other groups, because you're trying to eliminate the inbreeding from happening. It doesn't totally get eliminated, especially with dog breeds. That's why you have all of these problems. But either way, you're trying to eliminate the possibility of having a large dog, okay, by breeding only small dogs with small dogs, until you get to the point to where your only possibility is passing on this recessive trait, and the dogs just get smaller and smaller and smaller until they end up teacup size. You could do the same thing with people if you were to say only left-handed people slept with left-handed people. And over time, if you only had left-handed people sleeping with left-handed people, eventually you would get down to a situation to where you would just hit that perfect storm where both people are recessive and can only pass on left-hand dominant gene, and then you'll have only left-hand people. But that's the point of this, is you're born with the information you have in your chromosome. You don't add information, okay? They can, there's evidence that they can fragment DNA, and they do that through, whatever situation, and you get fragmented diseases and stuff, fragmented DNA and stuff, but it always ends up in some kind of disease or deformity or sickness or whatever it is. It doesn't ever really end up hardly ever as a beneficial change. It ends up as something that's not beneficial. I don't know, my phone's not focusing. But either way, that's the point that I'm making, is that you lose information every time you sleep with a person. That child isn't like, they don't get both of your information, like all of the father's information and all of the mother's information. They have a chance, like a 50% chance for each trait. If it's just a 2 attribute trait, they have a 50% chance of getting, of that possibility of, you understand what I'm saying? But either way, of 50% chance of losing some bit of information, of either being dominant, or recessive. So that's, how is it explained to me that the gene works? And when I thought about that, I was like, man, we're losing information. There's no way we're gaining information, so we can't evolve. Because if the trait for somebody to be born with wings doesn't exist, it's not in anyone's DNA, then it's never going to be, in anyone's DNA, So the possibility either way. So the possibility of evolving is it's impossible. You're not going to evolve into anything, because the information that is in your DNA when you're born is the only information that your body has access to pass on. So there's no way, raptors to birds or whatever their evolutionary theory is. It's never been proven. It's totally illogical, and it doesn't work. And anyone that looks at any actual science can tell you that, everything is the way that it is because God made it that way, or because man has corrupted it to be that way. Like if people want to talk about, how did these rocks form, or how did life form, or, et cetera, you have a very easy explanation, is that, the Almighty God created it that way. It didn't take him millions of years. He's almighty. It just took him a few days. And so that's how I like to disprove evolution, is that, your DNA that you're born with, your chromosomes, your information that you're born with, that's the only information that you have the possibility to pass on, and you don't pass on all that information. And if you did pass on like more information, if every person like got, the dad's information and the mom's information, and they got to carry, the total amount of both parents' information, then you could have a case for evolution. But since that doesn't happen, you don't have a case for evolution. It's not possible. And we can demonstrate that simply by looking at how dog breeds work or whatever. You could say that people evolved if you say you only bred big-headed people with big-headed people. You could eventually get just like a race or a group of large-headed people, okay? But that's not evolution, okay? That's just exclusivity. You're breeding only big-headed people with big-headed people until you're passing nothing but this gene for having a large head on, but they're not evolving into anything else. It's not like they became aliens. They're just big-headed people. So hopefully everybody understands the point that I'm getting to here. It's a very simple point. If you know anything about the genome, then you know for a fact that what I'm demonstrating here is true. And a lot of these things have even less, of a chance. Like, you have the parents maybe have the information to be able to pass on, 1 or 2 of, say, 10 different possible traits or whatever. And that both of those parents, you could end up with, say, like a white person that has the gene for blonde hair. If they sleep with a black person that, say, doesn't have the gene for blonde hair, I don't know if there are black people that have the gene for blonde hair or not. I don't know that I've ever seen a naturally blonde black person. It's just not in the genes that I know of. Now, it might be. But you have the chance of passing on that gene if the blonde hair is a dominant gene. Now, if say a black person with black hair, they don't have the possibility of passing on a blonde hair gene, then you're not going to have a child with blonde hair. So you have to end up in a situation to where, say it's a black person breeds with a white person, and then you have a blonde-haired, dark-skinned baby, then obviously they now have that information and they could pass it on. But before, they didn't have that information, so they couldn't pass it on. So that's what evolution is hinged on, is gaining information, and it just doesn't happen. Either way, I hope that this helped people kind of understand the way that I look at this, and maybe, just maybe, somebody will listen to this and understand, hey, that is how it works. Hey, evolution isn't true. Maybe I need to search out and find the Almighty God. Either way, God bless you. I hope this helps somebody.